whenever you are, Dr. Kunze.
Good morning. My name is Adalita Cantu, representing the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments. I'd like to introduce Councilwoman Ana Sandoval, who represents District 7 in San Antonio and an unwavering advocate for her constituents. Her experience as an urban planner and a master's in public health gives her a unique perspective about the environment and its impact on health and well-being. Councilwoman Sandoval.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cantu, and welcome everybody to beautiful Woodlawn Lake Park, where in 2 days from now, on Saturday, we will be celebrating Earth Day. And I'm proud to announce that this will be the first City of San Antonio event that has a target of zero waste, which I think is a tremendous deal, even though we're not talking about that today. But we may celebrate Earth Day on April 22nd or the immediate Saturday following that. But it's actually our responsibility to protect our environment and the health of our community every day. Our Earth Day theme this year is Invest in Our Planet, and that's fitting as we gather today to call on the Biden administration to fulfill its promise to cut carbon by at least 50% by 2030. And there's no greater investment we can make than for our children and grandchildren by addressing the climate crisis. Here in San Antonio and across the world, climate change is no longer a hypothetical scenario. It's here. From the deadly winter storm we experienced in 2021 to worsening drought and floods, this unstable climate is our new normal. We also know that locally, our coal-fired spruce power plants are some of the largest and highest carbon emitters. That is why City Council members like myself and many community advocates, like the kind you see here, have called on CPS Energy to end coal use as soon as possible. And I'm glad to say that CPS is answering the call. CPS Energy leadership has committed to working with the city and stakeholders to end coal use. I'm proud to serve as a liaison from City Council to the CPS Energy Rate and Generation Planning Advisory Committee, where community leaders like Dr. Cantu and many others are mapping out a plan, a path to shut down our coal-fired power plants as soon as possible. That is one and perhaps the most significant local action we can take right now to reduce our climate impact and make our air safer for all to breathe. Local communities across the nation are striving to do the right thing by our health and our climate, but we cannot do it all alone. Federal partners, Congress, Senate, and certainly President Biden, we need you to keep your word to cut carbon by 50% by the end of this decade. We need you to help us stop and avoid catastrophic climate change. But we also need you to protect so many communities whose health is affected by the pollutants that come with fossil fuel usage. Soot from coal, diesel particulate matter, smog, all disproportionately affect communities of color who are so many more times likely to live next to polluting sources like power plants and freeways. Toxic air pollution from dirty power plants and from coal plants, even coal plants that comply with current regulations, have devastating health impacts on communities and families across the country, especially people like the elderly, pregnant women, and communities of color. In the coming months, the EPA will reconsider regulations that have the potential to reduce exposure to mercury and other toxic air pollutants released from coal-burning power plants. We know that mercury is one of the most toxic poisons known to man, and that it's known to cause permanent brain damage to fetuses and babies. And fossil fuel powered plants, or coal-powered power plants, are the largest source of mercury pollution. EPA, Biden administration, you must set the strongest possible standards to reduce mercury, arsenic, and other toxins in our air. We call on you to save lives, to protect babies and children, and to advance environmental justice and grow our clean energy economy. Now you'll be hearing from a representative of the Hispanic Alliance Network? Access Foundation, I'm so sorry. From the Hispanic Access Foundation, Ms. Chantel Redan Hansen. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here today as an advocate for our health, our air, and our planet. And specifically to talk about the power plant in Bexar County, which is the 6th highest carbon polluter in the state. The J.K. Spruce Power Plant is a coal-fired plant. In the last 5 years, this dirty power plant has committed 74 violations of the Clean Air Act. Plants like these pollute the air we need to breathe and increase carbon emissions. We need to strengthen pollution safeguards and transition to clean energy. It's time. Toxic air pollution from dirty power plants has devastating health impacts on vulnerable communities and families. And this has disproportionately impacted communities of color. Currently, 2 in 5 Latinos live in 30 miles of a power plant nationwide. About 80% of the community living within 12 miles of the J.K. Spruce power plant comes from historically marginalized communities of color. We need to strengthen smog pollution standards and transition to clean energy to protect our communities and our planet. Over the next few months, the Biden-Harris administration and the EPA have an opportunity to improve mercury and air toxic standards and cross-state air pollution safeguards. Setting strong standards will protect our air, our health, and our earth. The Biden-Harris administration promised to cut carbon pollution by at least 50% by 2030. And without Congress passing bold investments in clean energy and climate solutions, he needs to come up with his own solutions for pollution. President Biden must use all the authority he has to enact strong pollution safeguards and reduce the carbon pollution from transportation and power generation driving the climate crisis. Climate change will not wait for us. We know that it can affect us when we're not ready, like Winter Storm Uri. Climate change is not only about warming temperatures, but affects every aspect of our lives, especially in an urban environment like San Antonio, like our air quality. Our air pollution and this smog is one factor of the climate crisis that is getting worse across the nation and our world, and threatening our ability to breathe clean air. We have the ability to do something about these threats, but those with the authority and the ability need to take action now. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Adelita Cantu with Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environment.
Thank you, Chantel, and good morning again, everyone. I am here in support of what Councilwoman Sandoval and Chantel have shared, raising the voices of the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments and calling for President Biden and his administration to take strong action on these standards that have been talked about. President Biden and the EPA have an opportunity to take several steps to cut pollution from the power plants, including setting those strong standards to slash the pollutants that we've been talking about. Toxic air from dirty plants has devastating health impacts, many times on vulnerable communities and families across the country, especially pregnant women and communities of color. Strengthening the mercury and air toxic standards will avert up to 11,000 premature deaths, 4,700 heart attacks, and 130,000 asthma attacks every year. As a public health nurse for over 40 years, I can tell you what those asthma attacks look like on the ground, particularly for vulnerable communities and families. A child gets sick, a child has an asthma attack, family does not have access through insurance, health insurance. Parents are working at jobs they do not have paid sick leave. They're having to make a choice. Do I take my child in to be seen or do I homeschool? This is what those asthma It causes permanent brain damage in babies and as well as developing fetuses. This is when, particularly developing fetuses up to 2 years of age, this is when the brain is developing the most. And an exposure to a toxin can certainly have a devastating effect on that development. Can lead to learning disabilities and birth defects. Prior to 2011, mercury pollution from these power plants was completely unlimited by the federal authorities, despite the fact that the power plants were responsible for 50% of all mercury pollution. Studies conducted by the EPA before the mercury pollution standard was enacted found that 1 in 6 babies born in the U.S. had unsafe levels of mercury in their bodies, meaning potential contaminants and learning disabilities, birth defects. So a stronger mercury standard would avoid annually up to 11,000 premature deaths, 3,000 chronic bronchitis cases, 5,000 heart attacks, 130,000 asthma attacks, and 5,700 emergency or hospital room visits. American Lung Association found that if the U.S. switched completely to cleaner energy vehicles as well as power plants, it would not only benefit the environment, which we've been hearing, but it would also save an estimated 110,000 lives and 1.2 trillion, not billion, 1.2 trillion in healthcare costs over the next 30 years. And in our country, saving healthcare costs is extremely important. So we call on the Biden administration to keep their commitment to clean energy and have the EPA strengthen standards in regards to emissions from these fossil fuel power plants. Thank you, and that is the end of our formal discussions, and we are open to questions.
In the press conference listing, y'all mentioned that 6 lives are taken from the power plant per year, I believe. Where did y'all get that statistic from?
6 lives are taken from this power plant?
Yes.
The Bear County
James.
Lung Association.
So we have a research memo that we put together. We can follow up with that source.
Okay, thank you.
Question. So locally, what would more resources from the Biden administration? I mean, it's kind of interesting to see the city calling on the federal government to regulate it, more aggressively. But the logic is certainly clear, right? But I'm wondering if you could speak to if more aggressive EPA action and stuff comes on with CPS, how does that? What kind of resources might come with that for the city? I mean, I even think of like the fish here, right? There's not a water body in the U.S., a major water body that is safe to eat the fish for pregnant women because of coal plants. So I'm wondering if there's even resources to let people know, like when people are down fishing, like to have better information. So there's a variety of resources, I'm sure, in addition to closing the coal plant early.
So, I was just, certainly federal regulations do just have the power of being federal regulations. That's one thing. And I think working together with local city council, local standards that are being developed, they can better coordinate those resources, like what you mentioned with the fish, but in terms of the environment as well. I think it's really key that the local push also has that federal push to not only have a clearer message, but also to have more resources.
I just want to flag that Councilmember Sandoval is going to have to go to make the city council meeting, but her staff is here to also handle and follow up questions. Unless you have one more.
Can I have one for?
We're still waiting for additional appropriations, right?
Yeah.
That come with clean energy sector jobs and green jobs, and that's not only a regulatory approach, but that's also a jobs approach that we definitely need here in the city.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? It took 8 years to close Dealey. Can we do Spruce in time, do you think?
That's from my experience working with the RAC, the Rate Advisory Committee. My goal is, and what we're pushing for, and what Chair the chair of CPS board is pushing for is by 2030 at the very latest. But if we can find some way to do it sooner, I would push for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mild to moderate. Non-attainment.
So they was that if this designation were to put forth, they would have to follow new regulations for air pollution. Do you think that is enough to deal with the problem here?
What we do know is that much of pollution, issues that contribute to climate change, comes from vehicles. And one of the things about the non-attainment status, like moderate, is that would enforce stricter vehicle regulations relative to emissions. So in that way, there would be an assistance that would be
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So, mandatory testing in San Antonio, this is a working city, right? And there's a lot of old cars, and certainly cumulatively plays out large risk, but it also seems like an EJ question. So if the largest polluters, like let's say Spruce gets another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but everybody, people are losing their vehicles, so are you concerned about a justice response in terms of air?
Right, yes, and I know that I've understood that issue because, again, working in the community, I see many individuals that do anything they can to keep those cars running because they have to. So I think that would be a call for our city council to release some funds that would help people in terms of getting their vehicles inspected. Much like with CPS and SAWS disconnections, and there's some resources there, we need to educate our communities on the ground using community health workers, using influencers in the community that can help people apply for those funds. But yes, that's a significant issue and one that does need to be tackled along with the attainment goals that we want to reach for vehicles.
CPS Energy has their RAC meeting talking about generation. Is that not doing enough as it is?
I think everything can be done. I think it calls for all of us to want to close Spruce as quickly as possible based on these issues. Certainly, CPS Energy has a lot to play on that. The Sierra Club and they're lobbying for that. All environmental organizations, as well as the communities, particularly the communities that live near Spruce. So we do need to work with them to be supportive of it as much as possible. CPS does need partners for this. Yes. The current timeline is 2030. And as Councilwoman Sandoval said, if there's anything that can be done to make that sooner, they will act. Or hopefully act.
Free dog.
He's been running around the whole time.
I know.
I'm watching him like,
Spots on my glasses tell me it's a great time to work.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Just on time. Thank you so much for coming.